Hi guys, in this video we're going to go through the process of adding some IK to our arm. Now this is the arm for a sort of a general sort of basic standard human type arm with a proper elbow and everything. And probably one of the main features for this particular setup is going to be this forearm joint, which will sort of incrementally rotate as we rotate the wrist. So what that's going to do is alleviate any major twisting problems we might have with the geometry in our character's forearms. It's going to ease that twisting a little bit between the wrist and the elbow joint. So we've got a very specific setup that we need to produce to get that effect, and part of that's going to be adding in a little expression script which will actually drive the rotation of this joint based on the rotation of a control handle that we will add sort of later on. So for this I just want to set the IK up first, and then in a later video we'll do that little expression when we're actually connecting all the control handles and everything in. So what we're going to do first of all is jump back up to our skeleton menu, down to our IK handle. I'm going to pop into the options here, and I'm going to make sure I'm running a rotate plane solver just here. Once again, we want to be able to adjust the twist of the elbow direction, so we need to use a rotate plane solver. So normally what we would often do is we would create an IK handle from the shoulder down to the wrist, like this. And when we flex the arm, we can see a bit of a problem here. What's happening is this second forearm joint, so we've got the elbow and then the forearm. The forearm's actually, in this case, being treated like an elbow joint. So it's like the character has two elbows. So we can't set this IK up in exactly the same way as we would for a character without the forearm twist. So we're going to do a slightly different setup. So I'm going to delete this IK handle, and we'll create a new one. So what I'm going to do is grab my IK handle. I'm going to start off at the shoulder as we normally would. I'll click on the shoulder joint. But instead of clicking at the wrist, what I'm going to do is click on the forearm joint just here, like this. So it's slightly shortened to what we would normally expect. Now what this is going to do essentially is still drive the movement within the elbow as we would expect. As you can see there, that's nice. But because the wrist joint is no longer part of that IK chain, it's no longer being driven by the IK. So all it's doing now is following the joint before it, which is the forearm joint. We can see that occurring there. So we're still getting this nice straight forearm. But here's the problem. Our controller is going to be set up on the wrist. So what we need to do really is get the forearm pivot point where the move tool here is appearing, just here. We need to get that pivot point, and we need to get it set to the wrist so that it's going to be in the same location as the control handle that drives it. Now, with the IK handles, it's not a simple matter of particularly just moving the pivot point. What we're going to have to do is go into the outliner and select the effector that's connected to this IK handle. It's a little node which is basically attached onto the IK. So what I'm going to do is pop open my outliner list, which is just here on the side of the screen. Okay, this is going to give me a list for the outliner and then also my perspective view. And what I want to do is jump into my hierarchy of joints, and I want to find the forearm joint. So if I expand my group out, these are all in a group. You guys might just find that you'll see like the root joint in this list, but mine has ended up in a group. So just look for root joint and just expand that out. Okay, so you can see a few effectors here. These are the effectors that I've put into the left leg. So these are all the effectors for the IK down here in the foot. What I'm looking for is the one that's connected onto my IK in my forearm. So if I scroll down and I look for forearm, which is just here, left forearm joint. Okay, if I follow this back to the little hierarchy line just here, so left forearm joint, and I follow it down, I'll see an effector just here. This is the effector for the forearm IK. So what I'm going to do is select this effector, and you can see that the pivot point is still in the location where the IK handle is. And what I want to do is move this pivot point to the wrist. So what we're going to do is switch on point snap, just here, at the top of the screen. And then I'm also going to hold down the D key on the keyboard. And that's going to allow me to move the pivot point. Now, if you've got your tool settings open, you'll see that holding down D activates the edit pivot option just here. If I let go, you can see it switches off again. So technically, you could actually just click this edit pivot. On a PC, you can also hit the insert key on the keyboard, and that toggles it on and off. So any of those three options to activate your editing of the pivot point, and then just drag your pivot point to your wrist joint, just there. And then you can let go of the key, or switch off insert, or switch off edit pivot. I'm also going to turn off snap to point. And you can see now that IK handle essentially appears as though it's in the middle of the wrist. So if I scroll down and I look for my IK handle, there it is there. I haven't named it yet, so I'm going to do that in a second. You can see that basically it's now treating it as though the IK handle is actually over here on the wrist joint, even though technically it's here on the forearm. So let's rename this joint. I'm going to call this left wrist IK, like that, and that's pretty much good to go. You can see when I move this around, the forearm now remains rigid, and that's going to allow us to basically set up a twist for the forearm. Okay, so I'm going to leave this one here. Keep in mind, later on down the track, we will be adding some control handles. So I'm going to do a video on how to add control handles to various joints. And I'll do one specifically showing you how to connect the wrist IK to the control handles and then set up that little expression as well. Okay, so we'll leave this here and I'll see you soon.